Good morning, Health and Social Care girls. Fantastic work so far over the last couple of weeks. I've been so impressed with what you've produced. It's not just the 1 or 2 lessons that have been at a high standard. As a whole group, you have consistently completed your lessons on time, and the quality of the work that you've handed in to me has been really good. So please keep this up. We've only got 2 weeks left. For today's lesson, we are looking at connective tissues. Now, by the end of this lesson, I want you to know what the different types of tissues present in our bodies are. I want you to identify the role of connective tissues within our body, and I want you to be able to explain the importance of connective tissues within our bodies. So please, can you complete the memory platform? Once you've done the memory platform, go over onto the next page where you will see all of the answers that are available to you, and then mark them independently. Once you've done that, then we can get started on the lesson. Connective tissues are our most common type of tissue within the body. Now, these normally lie underneath the epithelial tissues, and they each have a different function or different purpose. Throughout this lesson today, we're going to break down what each type of tissue does, what each type of tissue is built up of and consists of, and the role that they play within our bodies. Before we start the lesson, please go on to the next slide where you can see some key terms that you will need to know before accessing this lesson. I have 3 key words for you that I want you to have a good understanding of by the time you finish today's lesson. Having an understanding of these terms will also enable you to access today's lesson slightly better. So the first key term is arterial blood. Now, this is blood that flows from the heart towards the organs, towards the muscles, and it has lots and lots of oxygen inside. This means that it will be very bright in colour, so it will be a bright red. The second key term that I want you to walk away from today's lesson knowing and understanding is venous blood. Now, this is blood that's on its way back to the heart, so it's been to the muscles, it's been to the organs, and it has picked up carbon dioxide. Because it's picked up carbon dioxide, it means that it's a very dark red. And then finally, the third term that I want you to get down is the matrix. Now, the matrix is what the materials in the background are made up of. So if I took something like mucus as an example, the material in the background that it would be made up of would be like a jelly/watery substance. So matrix is the material that makes that's in the background that makes the tissue or the structure. I'm going to go nice and slowly so we can go over some of the key words that are more difficult. I'd rather we really understand them rather than rushing through it. So in terms of getting started, first thing that I want everyone to know is that blood is made up of the matrix, which is mainly water. Within that, we've got plasma, red blood cells and white blood cells. Our blood's purpose is to carry oxygen, carbon dioxide. They will both be in the form of gases, and it will also deliver nutrients around the body. When we think about nutrients that will be delivered around, it will be things like amino acids, glucose, enzymes, hormones, and also salts. When we talk about red blood cells, we can also refer to them as erythrocytes. These are found within the plasma. Our erythrocytes have no nucleus, and because of that, they just want to carry as much oxygen as possible. So in order to facilitate that, they don't have a nucleus. The actual cell membrane of a red blood cell is really malleable and elastic, and that's because a red blood cell needs to get into really teeny tiny places like capillaries. So due to that fact, the actual cell membrane is movable. Now, a term that some of you may have heard before is hemoglobin. Our red blood cells are red, and the reason that they're red is because of hemoglobin. So it's a protein, and it gives blood that red colour. Two of the key words that we looked at on a couple of slides ago were arterial blood and venous blood. We know that our arterial blood is blood that's leaving the heart. Because of our hemoglobin inside those red blood cells, it will give that blood a really, really bright colour, so it will be a bright red. When the blood is going back towards the heart and is filled with carbon dioxide, there will be less hemoglobin present. So because of that, it will be a really, really dark, deep red. Now we know what red blood cells do, we're going to start looking at our white blood cells. So we should know from science, doing it previously, that white blood cells are there to fight off infections. Now there are actually different types of white blood cells, so we're going to go through these in a little bit more detail. So another name for white blood cells is leukocytes. Now our leukocytes all have a nucleus, so that's one way we already know that they are different to red blood cells. The first type of white blood cell that we're going to look at is called a granulocyte. Now our granulocytes are designed to engulf foreign bodies such as bacteria and carbon particles. This process of engulfing the foreign body is called phagocytosis. This is not individual and specific just to granulocytes. We will see this again with another type of white blood cell. When we're thinking about our granulocytes, they are quite grainy in texture, and that's because you've got a grain, like a grain, that's floating around within the cytoplasm. The actual nucleus of a granulocyte is slightly lopsided, so it doesn't sit in the middle of the white blood cell. The next type of white blood cell that we're going to be looking at is called a lymphocyte. Now these are smaller in size and they have a round nucleus. These are really, really important because they produce antibodies. So those little things, those microbes that our bodies use to fight off infection, they are created by lymphocytes. Now the way that these work is your lymphocyte cell will kind of seek out foreign bodies. So imagine a foreign body within a cell. It has a little name tag on it that says, "Hi, I don't belong here." The lymphocytes are designed to seek out that name tag that says, "Hi, I don't belong here," and by doing that, they will be drawn to the microbe and they stop the microbe from multiplying. So if there is a foreign object in the body, they don't engulf it. That's what a granulocyte will do. The lymphocytes will stop that microbe from getting bigger and going through the process of meiosis. The next white blood cell that we're going to look at is a monocytes. Now these are special. The reason that these are special is because they are very, very good at phagocytosis. That means they not only work within the blood and within the circulatory system, but they will leave that system and travel to the site of infection. So let's say you have an infection in one of your organs, or you have an infection on like a cut. They will leave the site of the circulatory system and they will go and seek out that infection. So these are absolutely essential in fighting infections. So because of that, they are part of your immune system. The final type of, the final white blood cell that I want to talk to you about is the thrombocytes. Now these are platelets and they help to clot blood. I just want to say this really, really explicitly. Thrombocytes are commonly identified as a white blood cell, but they're not. The reason why they're not a white blood cell is because they don't actually fight infection. They get our blood to clot. So let's say you've got a cut and you are bleeding. The job of a thrombocyte or a platelet is to stop you from bleeding out. When it stops you from bleeding out, a scab is created across that cut. I'm sure we can all think of a time either when you were little, you fell over and you grazed your knees and then you ended up with a scab. That scab is caused from the platelets all bunching together and stopping the blood from pouring out. When that happens and the scab is formed over the surface of the cut, that scab stops the infection from getting into the body. Now there's one more thing that I want to tell you in regards to where these blood cells are produced. So our granulocytes and our monocytes and our red blood cells, as I've already mentioned, are produced in bone marrow. Now our lymphocytes are produced in the lymphoid tissue. So an example of this could be the spleen. Before we continue, I just want us to go over a hinge question. So give yourself about 5 seconds to pick an answer and then go on to the next slide. So which type of white blood cell is most likely to be part of the immune system? Is it A, thrombocytes, B, lymphocytes, or C, monocytes? So the correct answer is a monocyte. The reason why is because our monocytes actually leave the circulatory system in order to go and fight the infection. The next connective tissue that we're going to discuss is cartilage. Now cartilage is smooth and translucent. So if I always think about cartilage in terms of if you've ever chopped up a chicken before, sorry for those of you that are vegetarian, and if you go to the butchers and you buy your meat and you buy a piece of side breast, cartilage is that translucent, flexible piece of material that you can sometimes find within a chicken. The matrix is from a chondrocyte cell, so it's, as I just said, it's firm but it's flexible. And the way that I want you to picture this is like your ear. So cartilage actually creates the whole of our outside of our ear. So what I want you to do is just with your fingers pinch your ears, go all the way from the top all the way down to the bottom, and I want you to think about how that feels. I bet now you're probably all sitting playing with your ears, and yeah, you do look a little bit weird, but you set in and you're feeling your ears. You can feel that they're not as hard as bone, they're not as soft as muscle or skin, and that in between is cartilage. So if we were to take away all of the skin away from our cartilage, we would see like a glass-like material, but it has that level of flexibility where it is quite malleable. So our cartilage doesn't actually have any blood vessels inside. So the way that we get oxygen and the way that we keep this tissue alive is through diffusion from the base layer of the cell. You can also find cartilage in places like joints, so it's that spongy material that sits in between two bones, and it reduces the friction that takes place around the bone. So cartilage is really, really important in our bodies. The final connective tissue that I want us to talk about that you would have heard of before is bone. Now bone is much, much, much harder than cartilage, and it can be worn down by friction and by movement, which is why we have the cartilage in it, to try and reduce that friction. Now the sole purpose of bones is that they provide structure for our bodies, they are used for weight bearing activities, and they are also used for protection. If we think about like our skull, give it a little tap. When you tap it, you can feel that it's hard, and that's because you've got your skull across your head protecting your brain. If you didn't have that skull there, your brain would just be exposed and be a bit like jelly and be very, very vulnerable. So one of the purposes of this connective tissue is for protection. Now there's two major components of bone. The first one is calcium salts, and the second one is collagen fibres. These are very, very important to us when we are thinking about the way that bones are formed. So collagen fibres prevent the bones from breaking. I'm sure lots of you have heard about collagen in skincare, and it plumps your skin up, it makes it much fuller. That's because it's adding almost a bit like a lubricant to the skin, or not to the skin, sorry, it's creating like more of a lubricant to the bones, so it stops them from being brittle. Calcium salts give the bone the hard texture. So when we're thinking about this, our collagen fibres stop the bone from breaking easily, and they are on the inside. Then our calcium salts wrap themselves around the collagen fibres, and they give the bone its hard texture. So our tissues, we know, are made up of lots of different cells. So what cells are bones made up out of? Bones are made up of osteocytes. These are trapped within the matrix of the lamellae, and this is often referred to as our Harvesian system. So if we cut a bone in half, you would see lots and lots of tiny rings if you look through a microscope. Those rings obviously build the structure of the bone, and when we look inside of those structures, we would see lots of osteocyte cells. Running through the centre of a bone, you have the osteome. The osteome is like this hole here that we can see, and it should be hollow. That is so that blood vessels and nerves can run through the bone. I just want a quick pause point here. So again, obviously challenge yourselves. What would a bone be missing if it was brittle? Is it A, calcium salts, B, collagen fibres, or C, both? So the correct answer here is collagen fibres, but I hope this really made your brains tick. If we don't have collagen fibres, our bones will not have that flexibility. We know that bones break, but our bones would be much more brittle. Obviously, we need both of these components to build our bones, so if one was missing, the other one would be very ineffective anyway, but the correct answer is collagen fibres. We only have 2 more types of tissue left, and then we are done for today. So the first, second to last one that we're going to go through is the areolar tissue. Now, if you are meat eaters, you will know, or you will be able to identify what areolar tissue is. It's that sticky white tissue that binds muscles, blood vessels and nerves all together. The matrix of an areolar tissue is semi-fluid, so one of the ways that we identified a matrix earlier was like a jelly texture, and this is where we would find that in the areolar tissue. There is lots and lots of collagen and elastic fibres within this areolar tissue because we want it to be nice and flexible. An example of an areolar tissue is the dermis. So when we looked at the structure of skin last week, I think it was, and we looked at the dermis being at the very, very bottom and being like the base layer of the cell, that would be an example of an areolar tissue. It would be spongy, sticky, white, and it would be quite elastic. The final tissue that we're going to look at is an adipose tissue. So have a little look at the picture that you can see on the screen, and before I tell you what an adipose tissue is, I want you to challenge yourselves and see if you know what it is. So, an adipose tissue is very, very simply a fat cell. So this is an adapted areolar tissue. It just means that the cells themselves have multiplied greatly. These tissues are translucent in colour. So if you think of like a weird, I say weird, I've watched it. I've watched lots of them, in fact. If you think of those programs where you've got somebody that's going under general anaesthetic and they're having some sort of plastic surgery and they've got like a tummy tuck as an example, and you see that slice of fat that gets cut off of them, that's like, it's almost opaque slash translucent in colour. And the reason for that is because the cells get so filled up with fat that they actually push the nucleus out to the side. When that happens, it causes the cell structure to change colour and be more translucent. Now, this tissue is a great energy source, and it's also really, really good at insulating the body. So when we have excess fat on our bodies, it keeps us warmer, and it also acts as like a shock absorber. So let's say you fall over and you fall on your elbow. It's not an area that has a lot of fat on it, so that's why you're likely to graze that area, and that's why sometimes it hurts. Whereas if you fell over and you landed on, let's say, somewhere on your upper arm, you are less likely to cause serious injury because your fat works as a bit of a buffer and protects you from that. Moving on to our hinge question for this little section. Where are you most likely to find adipose cells? So, do you think you would find fat around the stomach? Do you think you would find fat on the skin? Or do you think you would find fat around the heart? When you pick this answer, please pick the answer which you think applies the most. So the two places here that you are most likely to find adipose cells or fat cells would be around the stomach and around the heart. I've put on the skin on here, but really it's a bit of a play on words, and I want you to be cautious and aware of things like that for when you go into your exam. You wouldn't find fat on top of the skin, you would actually find it underneath the skin. So what I want us to do now is go onto your Microsoft form. You will have had that link sent out to you by email. I would like you to go through the form that's on there and complete it. Guys, fantastic work. As always, I am really impressed with how you guys have been doing. You've got 2 more weeks left and I really want us to keep it up. So good luck, get going, and I will hear from you very soon.